Tomorrow, Arsenal host Man United in the final game of the WSL season. In this video, we look at how close the gap is between the two teams and why finishing second is crucial this campaign given the Champions League qualifying schedule. We also discuss Arsenal's form of late and how Sleger's approach will compete tactically with Marc Skinner's. This is our Arsenal vs Man United preview. Alright, let's get into it then. Arsenal play Manchester United this weekend in a game which really shouldn't have had any consequences, but now with Arsenal's recent form, Manchester United have a chance to claim second place. And this year, Harry, that feels rather important. Why is that?
Yeah, it is big due to the Champions League qualification in recent years. The second and third, it hasn't really mattered in terms of the number of the games you play to get into the Champions League. We saw Arsenal and United a couple of years ago entering at similar stages, both get knocked out disappointingly, but they've changed it now, and it is important, I think, and clubs will value finishing second place in order to play less games. It's a massive problem that teams, congested fixture lists, finishing second means you play two less games, and in the grand scheme of things that feels quite small, but when you're in pre-season, when you're prepping to build up to the WSL campaign and to build up to the bigger competitions, you don't want to have to play an extra 2 competitive matches before you even reach the start of the season. So for these two sides, for Arsenal United, it will be important to finish second, not only to get that runners up in the WSL and be second best to Chelsea, but it will be important to mean they don't have to go through those extra 2 games and they can have a better pre-season where they're not having to rush the pre-season or having to play games so quickly after the Euros.
Yeah, well, indeed. Obviously, there is the prestige element, as you mentioned, of finishing second over third. It's a higher place in the table. There's a slight increase in prize money, and obviously you've got that then over your rival team. But the heightened reason this year is that the qualifiers start so soon after the Euros. 3 days after the Euros final is the first qualifying round for the Champions League. And it just feels like all the dates are in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like, the Euros is a bit too late, the season's a bit too early, and so they come together quite horribly. But yeah, so 3 days after the Euros will be the first qualifying round. It means that for a side like Arsenal especially, who have a lot of English players who we will be hoping will see in at least the semi-final stage, if not the final, if not winning it, they will be playing a week or 3 days before the first qualifying round, which could make qualifying very difficult. If you've got a squad full of players who've just had a Euros, they're not really going to be fit and firing when it comes to the start of the qualifiers. And while you may say, well, they're going to be playing other teams in the same predicament, they may not be. Because if they're playing teams, I mean, you think of last year, Rangers, they played in this round. They beat them 6-0, Arsenal. But in a season where Rangers have got a fully fit squad who have had maybe 1 or 2 players play at the Euros, but not a large number, compared to Arsenal, who've had everyone play at the Euros and everyone's knackered, it could create surprises. So I think it's really important to get that second place and qualify for the second qualifying round. Either way, Champions League qualifying is really difficult now because they've added an extra qualifying round for the league phase, seemingly. But there's now, so it used to go first qualifying round, second qualifying round, through into the Champions League. Now it's first, second, third qualifying round, then through to the Champions League. And so they've basically just replicated the first qualifying round again for the second qualifying round, and then moved the second qualifying round to the third qualifying round. I feel like I said qualifying round a lot, but it just makes it really difficult now to get through. You've got to win 4 straight games, which are they're not 2-legged, they are just 4 matches you have to win to then play a 2-legged match to get into the Champions League.
It's crazy. I think that they've chosen the worst year to add an extra qualifying round when you've got the Euros and the start of the WSL season has been brought forward from last year, which was bizarre.
There was nothing last. That's the Olympics, I guess, but
so much shorter. The Olympics is so much shorter, but it does mean that, for example, if Arsenal do lose this game tomorrow and they do finish third, they will then have to play in that first qualifying round. If the Euros final is in an England-Spain final, suddenly that is the majority of Arsenal's starting 11.
And if Netherlands are in the semis...
Well, that's the other problem. Is that, to be fair, it's 3 days after the final, but it's only 7 days after the semi-final. So even if you've got the sides, even if you've got players playing in the semi-final, they are not really ready in 7 days to go again, get back into club training, and play in these qualifiers. And well, that's the other thing, is that usually they sides don't leave their international squads immediately, but I'm guessing that will be excused for this moment, because if not, Arsenal have got no players to use if they do end up or Man United in the same case.
Where is the holiday? We've got, you think of player welfare. Where is the rest this summer? Because they go straight out of the regular season into Nations League, which is 3 days after the Champions League final. They've got 2 Nations League fixtures to fulfil. Then they've got 2 weeks until they're back for World Cup warm-ups. Euros warm-ups. No player that has any self-respect is going to go and pig out for 2 weeks, sunning on a beach in Ibiza. You need to stay in the right condition to play the Euros. Then you go into the Euros, into a full-blown international competition for a month, and then you come out of that and you could be straight into qualifying rounds and pre-season, which is forced by how the qualifiers add up and how the pre-season and how close the season start is to the end of the Euros. It's going to be a really intensive schedule for players this summer, and following on from the Olympics last year means it's now back to back years where we've had that. Yeah. And people question why there's this build-up of injuries in the women's game and why people keep getting injured. Well, you've only got to look at the schedule. There isn't a gap. There isn't any sustained period of rest for players.
Yeah.
And I think it's making it very difficult for that level to stay as high as it is, because players are just constantly getting injured now.
Yeah, and suddenly it puts Arsenal in a really difficult position because they've got a Champions League final coming up and they don't want to have to be playing their full strength 11 and risking risking injuries and things up against Man United tomorrow. But they don't have a choice. I think that the reason we keep mentioning Arsenal is because I think that it has a bigger impact for them if they have to play after the Euros final. For United, yes, they've got some players, but even if England get to the final, is Maya Letitia going to be starting? Is Millie Turner going to be starting? Probably not. Gabby George probably won't be there. There's players. I think that United don't have as many internationals that will be at that tournament and playing every minute.
They've also built much more of a diverse squad. The problem with Arsenal is when your squad planning is very Eurocentric, you end up with a squad that it's going to be entirely taken to the Euros. There's very few players in the Arsenal team that aren't going to the Euros. So it would only be players who don't make the squads and Emily Fox. It's not going to be a fun place to be at the Emirates this summer. It's just going to be Emily Fox.
And the Aussies. Fox and the Aussies, and that is it.
Yeah.
And McKay.
Caitlin Ford and McKay. That is it. But yeah, the rest of the squad will all be at the Euros. So it's very different to United, who have, they've got Riviere, they've got Talis Joyce, they've got Hinata Miyazawa, and then obviously some of their English players, for whatever reason, don't really get a look in. So their defence is going to be absolutely fine this summer.
Yeah.
It's just going to be Turland, Toon. Even Turland is going to struggle to get loads of minutes.
Yeah,
because it's true. A really competitive national team. So, probably not even Turland playing full minutes. It's going to be Toon, Clinton, and Dominic Janssen. That's all they've got to worry about.
But even so, as you say, the likes of Turland and that may not even if she does play every minute for Norway probably not going to get to the final or semi-finals. They might, to be fair.
Never know.
But yeah, it's one of those where for United, I think this game is more important to finish second and to be runners up, because I think they deserve that. The way they've played this season, they deserve to be the runners up in the league. They've played really, really well, and I think that performance wise, they have been the second best side in the league this season. The less games is more of a luxury for United. For Arsenal, I think it is paramount they win this match, take that second place, and make sure they can take 2 games out of their schedule, because that could really hurt them. I think I thought it was going to impact them last year, and they went and beat City on the opening day, and it clearly didn't. But they don't want to have to play 6 games before they even get to the start of the season, and it's really important, I think, that for both sides, but especially for Arsenal, they do manage to finish second place. And I think that overall, it's a difficult one to call. Arsenal will be the most frustrated because they have thrown this away. They were in the driving seat. They had that second place wrapped up, and they've kind of just thrown that all away.
Yeah, obviously now that third qualifying round will be around the weekend of the WSL opener. So it's again really stupid qualifiers. I think the problem is the Champions League is still too small. There needs to be more teams. I think with the league phase, you can effectively do more teams without it being as schedule intensive. I think that because all you need to do is expand the number of teams, allow these bigger leagues to have teams entering automatically, and you remove the need for qualifiers, which when you've already got an expanding European schedule or international football schedule, when you've already got expanding leagues, I think, people will say, oh, the Champions League expansion will be bad. But actually, if it takes teams out of the qualifiers, they'll end up playing less games.
Yeah.
Because if you move these 6 games to an extra knockout round later in the competition, I'd much rather see that for these big clubs than them having to play in these qualifiers. You can easily make it so that there are another... Well, it's 18 teams in the Champions League this season. There's no reason that couldn't stretch up to 24 or eventually to something like 30. With the league phase as it is now, you don't need to have an even number to be able to balance it out.
Yeah.
Because obviously you just knock out an odd number or send through and the number that you need to then play your knockout rounds. I think having an extra knockout round later in the competition just adds a little bit of jeopardy, which we felt.
Yeah, you lose 4 games and you gain fixtures that are more competitive, and it means that sides can have a proper pre-season because, again, but no matter who wins this football match, both Arsenal and Man United are going to have to navigate playing 4 or 6 games before before the start of the season, and it's difficult because, again, it means you can't prepare. It means that it's more difficult to implement anything new tactically because obviously you're learning it, but you're also going to have to use it in games. And suddenly, if it's not working in games, you then
how would they implement anything? If Renee Sleger wanted to change the tactic this summer, she wouldn't have any pre-season to do it in.
Steph Catley would nail it, but that'd be about it. It's because that's all she has to work with. But yeah, it puts both coaches in a very difficult position. And I think they'll both be focused on trying to get the 3 points this weekend.
I think the whole Champions League format needs workshopping, and that's a topic for another video.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is with the new league phase coming in. We'll see how it works this summer, but only 4 teams getting through to the quarterfinals automatically, and then the next 8 having to play in the knockout phase. It's going to mean at least one of the big clubs, one of those top clubs, ends up likely playing an extra round.
Yeah,
which adds more jeopardy.
It does, but
we want to see those teams later in the competition.
Yeah, exactly. It's that's the other thing with qualifiers. They can catch you out. They caught PSG out last year. They caught Arsenal and Man United out the year before. So it's I think, but both these sides have learned that you can't afford to take these lightly. You can't afford to rest. Arsenal last year, yes, they battered Rangers, but they only beat Rosenborg 1-0, and they did lose. Yes, they beat Herken 4-1 on aggregate, but they did lose the first leg 1-0 because they learnt in those fixtures that you can't take it lightly. There was 2 opportunities there where they nearly got knocked out, and that would have been a massive underachievement. So both sides know they're going to have to field strong sides, and they're going to have to give it 110%, because if not, there'll be sides in those qualifiers who can really knock them out. It depends who they draw, but they could cause them some real problems.
Also depends if they want to play in the Women's Europa Cup, because they could go and be the first winners of that somehow.
Yeah,
they'll have to work out how to do that because we've got no idea. But yeah, the final, by the way, is in Oslo. That's quite fun. Bit of a different location.
What, the Champions League final?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Lovely.
Well, that's fun.
That's nice.
Let's talk about the game then. Arsenal-Manchester United. Arsenal not in great form, but could you see them getting a result?
It's a really difficult one because, again, you take this fixture earlier in the year, you take Arsenal's best performances, and they've looked brilliant. And I know they drew that game at the Leigh Sports Village, but from minute 1 to 89, Arsenal were the better side, and then Melby Mallard scored an equaliser late on, and Man United somehow drew that football match. But United have got better since then, and Arsenal got really good after that, and then have become terrible in the last couple of weeks. And
they beat Lyon and now have just lost all ability to play football.
They beat Lyon, beat one of the best sides in the world, got the Champions League final, and just went, well, that's us done. That's the best we can do.
We're on the beach.
Yeah, just throwing the towel now, and we're already thinking about Lisbon. But they've got to be careful, because if they look as poor and as open at the back as they have done in the last couple of games, Man United will run riot. We've seen how United take advantage of sides that don't look strong defensively. Take Man City, for example, at the Etihad. There's been other games this season where United, if you aren't organised against United, their front line will tear you apart. And that is a massive problem for Arsenal, is if Aston Villa can score 5 and Brighton can score 4, how many can Man United score? And I do think Arsenal will play better. I think they'll be more organised. Sleger's has to change the pivot. That is a non-negotiable. Renee Sleger's and Arsenal will not get away with a Little and Calente pivot again. She has to learn the lesson, because they've played it in 2 games and they've had no control and they've had no stability. Leia Valti has got to come in for me. Has to come in for this match to give them a bit of control, to give them a bit of bite, especially because Arsenal in possession, they've been caught on the ball by Brighton's press and by Villa's press in their own third. United's press, like United will be laughing because they're going to just turn the ball over every time Arsenal try and play out. Arsenal have got to be organised, and they need to bring in someone like Valti who is comfortable on the ball, who will just slow the game down a bit, yes, but that will help Arsenal just to get a bit of control and to just not concede every time they try and play out.
Yeah, I do broadly agree. I would say that Brighton are probably the best pressing team in the league.
Yeah,
but United are very strong as well, pressing wise. We saw that against Manchester City. I think so. To pose a question, Arsenal can get away with a draw here. That's seen them go second. Is that a help, or could that create a little bit of complacency? Could that create a situation where Arsenal are defending rather than trying to actually go and win the game?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one to get right for a manager because, as you say, when you go into a game, you and your players know that a point will do, but you have to find a way to get your players to go for the win. Because, as you say, we see it time and time again. When sides need a draw, when they only need a point, they try and sit back and they conserve what they got. And that, yes, that does work sometimes, but it leaves you very vulnerable because suddenly all the opposition need to do is score one goal and then you've lost the game. And I think United will know that. They'll try and get on top early. They'll try and put Arsenal under pressure. And then Arsenal's mindset will automatically switch to, right, they're putting us under pressure, so we're just going to sit back, absorb it, and then take the point. But that is a risky strategy. I don't think it's what Arsenal want to play, but it's a strategy that Skinner will try and force Arsenal to play. And if that works, then United will have the last laugh in this game. It's up to Arsenal to go out there, start on the front foot. They need a good start because in the last two games they've started horribly. They need a good start. They need to get up onto United and try and give ask United some questions early doors, because if United get on top, suddenly it's that mental side of things for the players, for the fans. You think, oh, right, here we go again. We've had two poor results where we've been played off the park, and now suddenly we're up against it again and we're probably going to lose. So it's up for Arsenal, I think, that to go out there, be positive, and really take the game to United. Don't let United settle, because, as we've seen, if this United side get into their rhythm, they look pretty unbeatable.
Yeah, I think we've seen some really impressive performances from Manchester United. I thought last weekend was a really well executed tactical performance against Manchester City. They, first half, got it wrong. I don't think they were on it, but there was a good switch throughout that second half, and I think we saw a lot of United conceding because of individual errors, but making up for it through really nice play in the final third. So, yeah, I think we also saw United's defence finally get exploited this season, which we haven't really seen. A lot of the goals United have conceded have either been through mistakes or through other teams just getting a nice deflection or a really good goal. A lot of it hasn't been, they've been played through, but what we saw was a much more direct approach from Man City, which did cause issues for United.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to see whether Arsenal look to exploit them in the same way and how United perhaps try and cope with that. Either way, I think as much as it's an important game, I think Skinner will be less worried about it because they've got they've got the FA Cup final next weekend. He hasn't got many players at the Euros this summer, so I don't think he'll be too worried about having that earlier qualifying round. But equally, I think he's got that drive, hasn't he? Talk about him having an ego. It depends how you want to term it, but I like a manager that has that ambition, that has that self-belief. But however you want to describe it, he does have that want to beat everyone and be as hard at the turn as possible. And that is to the detriment sometimes because he wants to win every game. But actually, the best thing to actually would be a bit calmer against Arsenal and then go hell for leather in the FA Cup final. I think he'll go for this game. He'll want to get one over Sleger's. He'll want to get one over Arsenal. He'll want to finish second in the league. And I think actually for United, it's a bigger statement of intent to finish second. It's a huge statement of intent because they were second 2 years ago. Last season, there was a huge drop-off, I think symbolised nicely in the final day where they were beaten 6-0 by Chelsea. I think they'll be keen this season to finish second and show that they're once again back at that level.
Yeah.
For Arsenal, though, finishing second is also important as a statement. They've not finished second now for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
It's been a while since they've been at that top level. So I think they'll want to finish second again to make that statement. So this game is one where there is pride on the line, and that can create a great competition. There's also less football on the line in the Champions League qualifiers, which again I think is an important thing. So yeah, it should be a feisty game.
Yeah, it should be. Prize money as well is another thing. You finish second place, you get more money, and especially from a United point of view, and Arsenal to be fair, money, you need money.
United might be all right because obviously they're going to the World Super Sevens tournament.
And they might win that and just win all of the money in the world.
I did feel like an ad read, and we're not sponsored. If does anyone want to give us the World Super Sevens, they can. But yeah, that's going to be interesting for prize money for United. Obviously, Arsenal can't compete because they're in the Champions League final, which I'd argue
Imagine they
slightly
did.
better.
Imagine Arsenal turned up day before the Champions League final and they're playing some seven-a-side tournament. I mean,
It's the same week, isn't it? But it's in the same
yeah,
country, so it's in Estoril. They can then get the bus up to Lisbon, ready for the Champions League final. A little bit of a pre-game
it'd be ridiculous.
preparation.
That'd be fun for United. They decide to throw some seven-a-side games in there. I can't wait to see the professional footballers play seven-a-side.
Well,
That's going to be interesting.
again, there's so many weird things about it because they play in the FA Cup final on the Sunday, and the tournament starts a few days later
Yeah,
in Estoril.
it's ridiculous.
So if they win it, their players are all going to be hanging at the tournament, and if they don't, they're all going to be crying. So either way, I can't see them winning the Super Sevens tournament.
Load of hungover and tired professional footballers playing seven-a-side football in Portugal. Sounds like a great weekend.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant, really. I can't wait. But yeah, that's going to be... We've already seen 3 or 4 United players pull out.
Smart.
We're not sure on who. That's what Skinner communicated in his press conference ahead of this Arsenal game. But we have seen Myla Tissier say she's going to play. So at least she's going to be there.
That is. United are the problem. They need a right back.
Yeah, who is going to play right back in this game? Do we have... There's no information on Jade Riviere. So
Yeah, and I think...
Heath Mannion's obviously suspended.
Yes. From a United point of view, there is no point risking Riviere. Riviere is the one player you don't play in this match because you need her for the cup final because Riviere has been, I think, probably been their best player this season, and credit to her. And I think
Joyce is out there as well, to be fair.
yeah, there's a good conversation, but I think you need Riviere in the FA Cup final, so I wouldn't risk her. Mannion is obviously suspended, so I think you're probably looking at putting Letitia right back and bringing Dominic Janssen into that back four.
Now, that's too sensible. I reckon it would be Bizet right back.
Oh yeah, that's a good shout.
Again, and then Toon on the right wing or something like that.
Okay, that does work. Other question, Mallard or Turland?
Turland to start. I think we saw last week the impact Mallard can have off the bench, and the fact she can come on and play any position in the front line, I think is really important. And Mallard doesn't get her goal if it isn't for the flick on from Turland.
That is true. So maybe you put them both on there, and you do that thing. You put Bizet deeper, and put Mallard on the right. I just think Arsenal, that ball in behind is so easy at the moment because they're so all over the place as a back four. The amount of teams that have just thread the ball through and suddenly they're in on goal because the back four is on a diagonal and no one's marking anyone. It's something United got to exploit. Arsenal are going to have to improve tenfold. United will look at it and think, well, if we play the football we've been playing all season, Arsenal won't really have a chance.
Yeah, I think that's why they want to use Toon as well in attack midfield, is that she's a really strong presser. So if you bring her into there, you've then got her and Turland are both very effective in the press. I think they'll do well in that position and try and pin that Arsenal backline back. We've seen them make a lot of mistakes in recent weeks. They'll be hoping to do that. Miazara and Clinton, I reckon, will be the pivot, because Janssen's going to have to play, could have to play in the back line, or right back is the other option. We saw her come on and right back, so she could do that. Though I'd put her centre back and Letitia right back. Skinner's allergic to doing that, so they'll be interesting to see what they do. But United will win this game if they press Arsenal aggressively, are tight at the back, and finish their chances. That's the simple fact of it. I think it's difficult to debate, but I would say United have been the second best side in the WSL this season. They deserve to finish second.
And on form now, I think for Arsenal to win this match, it's going to take United to play poorly. Because if United play as well as they have, even Arsenal on their good day would put up a good fight. But the way Arsenal have been playing, I don't get where they pull the performance out from, because it hasn't been there in the last 2 weeks. And yes, Villa was a rotated side, but Brighton wasn't. I don't see where they turn a 4-2 loss and a 5-2 loss to Villa and Brighton into suddenly beating Manchester United. But you never know. Football's a funny game sometimes. Arsenal might turn up and United might not, and they might be thinking about the FA Cup final. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, fair enough. It'll be a very interesting game. Regardless, do make sure to join Harry on Sunday for the game. Harry will be live for the WSL final day, so that'll be a very interesting stream. Obviously, watching Arsenal Manchester United and then the trophy lift. So for any Chelsea fans out there, or anyone who wants to hate watch, join Harry there. Other than that, we're back on Monday with our WSL weekend review, and then next week we'll be doing some various WSL review content and then FA Cup preview content. So look out for that. The season's over this weekend. I can't believe it.
It's crazy. It's gone like that. 32 match weeks, almost done.
Indeed, it has felt like a rather fast season, but nevertheless, we're into the Euros in a month, so look out for that. And still, obviously, there's some huge finals to play. Both these clubs involved. Arsenal in a Champions League final at the end of May, Manchester United in the FA Cup final next Sunday. Should be
Tasty.
good, indeed. That, though, is everything. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you haven't already, check out our video from yesterday where we spoke about London City Lionesses. That will be on screen now, so you can go and check that out. Thank you very much for watching, though, and we will see you next time.
See ya.